Hello, everyone. I'm Eric Cox. I'm a member of the Net Capital team. Let's allow one moment for everybody to settle in. Thanks. All righty. Well, let's go ahead and dive in. Hello again. Welcome, and thank you so much for joining me. I'm very excited to welcome in Barbara and David here with High School First Responder. As always, these companies are actively raising capital on the Net Capital platform, and I will add a link to that directly in a moment. But you can always go to netcapital.com and search High School First Responder, or netcapital.com/companies/High School First Responder. So a quick little bit of housekeeping. Please do use the Q&A feature built into chat. As always, we want to keep this as interactive as possible. I do know that Zoom also has a chat feature, but the Q&A is so much easier to keep track of all the questions and make sure that we get to as many of them as possible. So with all that being said, Barbara, maybe you can take us off. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what you're building with High School First Responder?
Okay, thank you, Eric, and thank you for having us on to talk about High School Responder. High School Responder is a rapid response communication systems for America's high school campuses. And as you know, during the pandemic, teenagers were having even more difficult times. And what I saw prior to the pandemic concerned me. And so that is why I determined that we needed to have a new tool that we could get engagement from the school staff and the students to help and facilitate better communications.
Absolutely, and I'm just adding the link into the chat right now. You can visit it. Again, that's netcapital.com/companies/High School Responder. I apologize for that, Barbara.
No worries.
And I know you're an educator. Can you tell me a little bit about your background, and then kind of how you got involved, and a little bit of a deeper dive into what you saw with the problem that students were facing?
Certainly. Thank you. Yes, as you said, I worked in the high school setting for 15 years. And it was eye-opening to see the changes take place during those 15 years. Also, previous to that, I had been a police dispatcher for many years. So in seeing students come into my office in various states of need, trying to get various people to speak to them, if it was not myself, other guidance counselors to find out where they were, it just saddened me to think that students were struggling in this day and age at that rate. And it concerned me so much that with my degree in organizational behavior and applied psychology, I thought, what can we do? How can we get these lines of communication open? And so with the mobile apps, it's a way for the students to get to the staff in a timely manner. Should there be an emergency, or should they just need to check in to just get a little bit of reassurance? And so with that in mind, over those 15 years, it just was something that was dear to me, that I felt that we in the community at large needed to be there for our students and do all we could to help them.
Absolutely. And David, you bring a unique perspective to the team as well. Can you tell us a little bit about your background and how you got involved?
I went to school to become an accountant and took the required computers class and turned into a tech weenie. Because if I could teach the computer how to do the things that I learned in school, I only had to focus on getting the right message in so that the right message came out. And so I got lucky enough over the years to build some very big technology projects that we had used to change industry standards and the way things were being done in the industry. So we're doing the same thing here. We're allowing the kids to reach out in the way they know how to reach out, which is through their thumbs. And we're allowing them to communicate to the school people their situation. I'm feeling depressed. I'm feeling bullied. I'm feeling like suicide. We have to respond to those kids more directly. And that first step of communication is most important. I often use the analogy of Paul Revere, who rode across the countryside and screamed the message, "The British are coming." Each village and each farmer responded how they wanted to respond to that message. But the message is what set the tone for the day. That's what we're doing. We're trying to get a message as quickly as we can and get a responder as quickly as we can to that situation. We are not quite first responders because we're not medically trained and we're not on location, but we're bringing those people together if the situation merits that. It's quick for the staff to be able to include more help from inside the school or more help from outside the school, thus continuing the communication.
Yeah, and before we dig deep into the solution that is high school responder, like how big is this problem? I think people with children and or have been paying attention to the news recently understand that there's some concerns, but how big really is this desperate need for new campus communication protocols?
Well, let's just start with some numbers to define the marketplace. I can define it as the accountant and say there's 23 million kids. There's another couple 100,000 staff and support, and then all the families of the school children. Another way for us to look at it is who in the audience doesn't have a child or a grandchild or a next door neighbor or who wouldn't step up and help in a situation. If they aren't plugged in and they don't have a communication tool, they can't help. So how big is the marketplace? I would rather say is how many people aren't there, because it's a very small percentage. Everyone wants to take care of the kids and is willing to reach out. If they knew how to help, they would. And this is a pathway not only for the kids to reach out, but for the community to bring together the things the kids need. Let's say the child needs a size 6 shoe because the only pair he has just fell apart and he's embarrassed to go to school without his shoes. That's a response that can come through notification or a tip that came into the school, or another kid's not eating well, so how could he possibly learn well? We need that information, and the students have it, the staff members have it, and the parents have it, and we're putting those into a triumvirate to support the kid, whether it be a care emotion, I'm anxious, somebody's bullying me. These are all things we want to help with. We don't know how.
I think, when you talk about all those different needs that the students are facing, it almost feels insurmountable. But I know there are like 5 big categories that you identify as the problem, including bullying and cyberbullying, which is, I think a lot of us identify as growing. I don't want to use the term lightly, but pandemic, epidemic, or something of that caliber, self-harm and suicide. Where do you think where's the tip of the spear? Where do you think is the very initial communication that these students will be having?
Well, glad you asked that question, because it actually identifies one of the things we want to be known for. We let the schools make all the determinations, all the rules, all the invitations for anyone who comes into the community. And the communication between the community members is all controlled by what the school's agenda and policies are. We are simply the horse that Paul Revere is riding to say the British are coming. So again, the horse doesn't care what the message is. His job is to carry it to the people that need to hear it. This is the same thing. If the school's interested in, or something really bad happened and the school wanted to keep it contained, they would be able to put that up in the app, like 2 kids were hurt in an auto accident and they're in in the hospital? How do we send a message to them securely and safely and only within the community? This is something the schools don't know how to handle now. And they have hodgepodge collections of how are we going to communicate this message? How are we going to notify schools out early? How are we going to notify schools not happening today because there's a snowstorm? These are all messages that cause ripple effects. And so again, we're a message carrier more than anything. We're bringing two people together that need to talk.
Yeah, and that's difficult in today's school settings because some schools don't have enough counselors. They don't have enough people to be in all the buildings. So students going down to talk to someone when they're in desperate need and no one's there sometimes. And it's not that the counselor doesn't care. They may be in another building taking care of another situation. Thus, they can reach out and communicate with that student through the app to let them know that they hear them. They'll either get someone to help them or they will be there to see them within 5-10 minutes. It really truly speaks to the old adage of it takes a village to take care of our children now. And I think now more than ever, we really need to speak to that and step forward and do that because there are going to be a lot of after effects with everything that has happened to them. They'll be going back to school in the fall, but you know, it's going to be anxious for them because a lot of them haven't been in the school for a full year. So, you know, I'd like to be there and support them as best we can.
You know, that's a really important point, and the timeline I think is critical. I do want to circle back to the tracks that you've had so far and where you can go in the future. But before I do that, Barbara, if I could bring you in and talk a little bit more about this horse. Well, what is the horse? What is HSIR? Tell us about the messaging platform and how it works.
We made the app very simply because you have to understand when a student is in crisis, they're not functioning, you know, as best as they can. There's one line that they can go in on. It's called a check-in, and they can put in what's happening with them. And a check-in is about themselves, and they can say, "Hey, I'm being bullied by Susie and Bobby, and it's, you know, I'm on a say on a scale of 1 to 10, it's like a 5 or a 6. It's really not good right now." And you know, they can put in where they're going. I'm either heading down to the office or the guidance counselor. I'm going to my next class, but someone will get notified of that. And the school, as David said, sets the rules as to how that notification procedure goes. So it totally cascades to someone who can reach out. And then what they can do is that is immediately logged. And if they need to chat right away, they can. Conversely, students really care about one another. And I've seen this time and time again where they'll come down, they'll say, "Did you know this was going on with my classmate?" So we also have another area for the students called the tip. And the tip can say about what's going on with another student. And they can say, you know, either the child's feeling, you know, anxious, depressed, suicidal, you know, rated on a scale of 1 to 10, how severe it is. And then they can say, you know, whether it's a secret, you know, and at that time, you know, that can go in and that can go to the school staff and they can deal with it. And conversely, if it's a true emergency, they'd say, "This has happened. They found a kiddo in the school bathroom and they're harming themselves in some capacity." They're able to get the resources that they need to have someone come there right away because there is an emergency button if it would come to that type of escalation. So we try to make it, you know, easily understandable. We put emojis next to whatever it would be, like anxiety or etc., so that they could also relate when they're, you know, in a heightened agitated state, that they would also get a different cue and be able to communicate. So that's in essence what it is.
And I'll
Yeah.
go there. From a system point of view, it's very, very similar to a 911 emergency call center. But instead of fire, police, or ambulance, we're asking homeroom teacher, guidance counselor, or family and friend. You can literally set who is going to help and be able to respond to that situation. So it's a set of apps and a server-based notification system where the school sets all the rules. If it's anxiety and a 1, wait till the end of class and talk to your homeroom teacher. If it's an anxiety 5, there's a different response. If it's anxiety 10, there's a different response. Different set of people are notified in each case so that they can respond appropriately. So what we've done also is expanded. One of the first things Barb shared with me when we talked about this was a parent calling up and saying, I just talked to my daughter, she's in one of the bathrooms and she may get hurt. And so Barb's crew spread out and tried to search the 20 bathrooms in the school. They finally found her in time and the crisis was avoided, but it took them 20 minutes to find her. So one of our shortcuts was to use location tracking during the call-in. This is a beacon. And so we can put beacons around the school to see where the student was last seen. So if she was seen in the west stairwell near, that's where they'd go and look first. So we also use GPS because the schools came back to us during COVID and said, we got a big problem because we don't know where they are. Some are in school, some are not in school, some are remote learning, some are in the park. We need to be able to communicate with them and know where they are. So again, that allows the GPS to say they're at home, they're on school property, they're on the ball field, they're on whatever they need to do. So when that call comes in, just like 9/11, 9/11 knows where you're calling from, okay? They immediately know, and it's already on the board, the closest fire truck, the closest medical truck, the closest policeman to serve that person's needs. We did the same thing. We mimicked the 911 crisis center for a school situation center.
Yeah. And should it be, one of those horrible situations that we're reading about in schools nowadays, that say it is a shooting, what we can also do is we would be able then to say, okay, we need to find out where our students are. If we can locate them, that would also help us, determine how to direct them, to get them to safety. That's another huge thing that is part of this, that goes back to my, dispatching background, which is how do we best get the help? How do we get them out of harm's way? And then that should hopefully, help the police and other responders, first responders that are truly going to come in that type of emergency situation.
Absolutely. It really feels like there are two key tenets here, and it's the localized model that's been proven through 911 and GPS and geolocation and being able to be very thoughtful and organized. And then there's just the under-resourced problem. I went to a large public high school with almost 3,000 students. And I'm sure we had a guidance counselor somewhere. I'm sure we had support somewhere, but it's just, it's unreasonable and kind of unfeasible to try to support that type of a population with the handful of people that they have. But we had so many, student body, and advisors and supporters and volunteers. And if there was an opportunity to communicate and organize a larger group to support, seems like that could be a really effective model.
Yeah,
that's exactly what we built it for, was for the escalation, first to the school, second to the community, and then in the cases of emergency, we can reach out to the proper first responders who can come and support the school responders. So that's where we're at with creating that mechanism.
Yeah, what a great ecosystem between the two groups. And I really like the student-to-student support. I think there's a real opportunity. I think there's probably a little bit more comfort with your peers or certain groups telling certain things. There's always just a little bit of a disconnect when it's an authority figure, so to speak. I'm sure that the investors in the attendance have some questions about the business model. Let's pivot a little bit towards how does HighSchool Responder make money?
It's a really standard subscription-based seat license software as a service offering. We give the school all the apps. They're up on the app stores now, and you can get logged in and see it. It's not maybe, it's now. Our real truth is our history helps us find a different way to pay for things. And so in this case, we'd like the school to be the client, but we'd like to find a different way to get this in without affecting their budget. And our solution to that was to look at grants. And we produced an internal grant system we call GRACEPO for grants and sponsorships that allow us to put federal, state, and most importantly, the foundation grants into our system and match them with the schools based on locations and needs. And what this allows us to do is apply for not only our service, but some other services that commingle with ours, teaching people how to early detect a situation, how to manage a crisis on the spot. So that, and they love our system because it's a system that sends messages and then it helps them measure how big a response there should be. And so that's hugely important for us. That is always the grant go for button, because when the grant people look at us and we match the magic buttons of technology, education, and wellness all at once. So we hit a lot of the buttons for the grant applications. And when our grant team puts it in place, it puts it into the system for the school without any cost or drag on the school's budget. So they're spending time and effort and money. This is a very short step without spending their budget to have a system that measures for them. Because one of the other sides of this is, I think, like an accountant, is in our home state of Pennsylvania this year, the schools must present a plan, measure the results, and give a summary in order to get funding next year. And right now, they don't even have a baseline. They have no way to measure this. And so by us coming in and helping create a baseline, we can show how different programs run during different, like anti-bullying campaign. We can actually see how that affects the tips and the check-ins and the categories of, and we did really good with this one, we should share it with other schools. Or look here, we did depression and we were way above the national average. We have to learn how to reach out to these kids in depression and bring them out and start the communication with them. So again, it's a measurement tool and a compliance tool for the schools as well.
And a more, intimate level student to student, the other thing that it does is when a student, when you see a student kind of failing and you think what's going on, maybe some other teachers might have some information. I mean, you can gather that information. You can say, hey, let's get together with this kiddo. Let's see what we can do to help resolve that situation. And then you can track and see how they will improve and what they can do to adjust. And it's a fluid measurement that is all for the benefit of all the students.
Yeah, that's great. The idea of having some like data-driven analysis and really some insights into, we all recognize that there's a problem, but what solutions are actually working. A lot of people are trying different things, but being able to really identify and target and be thoughtful about what should be replicated, what should not be. What a great feature.
And I think it's particularly important that people get a handle on what the kids are like mentally when they come back to the school setting. I think it's a very important time that we gather that, we find out where they are, what we can do, because it's very crucial, because some of them might be missing areas of education that they were normally strong in, but due to whatever things were happening in their home life or how things were handled at school, they may need more assistance. And we need to find that out early on so we can help them get through and get to graduation and get to a successful future.
Oh, absolutely. In Pennsylvania and worldwide, that's great. And I know you both touched on this, but I want to take a little bit of a deeper dive into the market size. And I know, U.S. education, billions of dollars in market size. What do you view as the kind of the annual addressable U.S. market for this specific country?
We found the number 2 billion on a government website that is a number that we can look at and say that might be what it was before, but it's not going to be what it is in the future. So right now, so many people are focusing on trying to react to this tidal wave that's coming. And even with everybody locked arm in arm, we're not going to be able to stop it until we start building things together. I know that sounds altruistic, but that's what's coming at us. And before we all get swamped, we really need to have some plans in place. And so that's really what we're able to help create, that baseline plan of how do we respond to this situation at this level. And it really lays out for the school, just like they practice right now once a month in an Alice drill, fire drill, of how do you get safely out of the building when there's a fire. We would like them to expand and say, here's how you handle the situation for many other kinds of situations. If you know someone who's suicidal, if you know someone who's, then reach out this way. And it's a teaching exercise so that the kids know that pathway exists.
And if you think about it, the app is like a fire alarm in the students' hands. We've said that before. I mean, they have it. I mean, it's right here. They have it. They can say when they need help. And not everyone's going to need it every day, but when they need it, like it is up on the wall, it's there. They can get it, and they have the power to do that, to take care of themselves and others.
Can I brag for a minute, Eric?
Please.
I'd like to talk about the other thing that one of our partners built. Doug Brown, the third guy into the company, he's a marketing wizard and branding mythologist. He wanted us to be able to tell our story correctly. So he made a series of videos from the 4 views of the 4 stakeholders, from the eyes of a student, from the eyes of a staff, from the eyes of a family, from the eyes of a friend or champion for you. And those videos are available at help.highschool.com. And so you can go on, there's a password, look at student, and we can share this with anybody who wants. Log in as student, and the super secret password is ABCD1234. Super hard to remember, but that gives you a video introduction and then a short video of each of the 4 functions that a student has: his self check-in, his tip about others he's concerned about, our chat function, which is the most used function for the kids because it's a private chat, one-to-one, nobody else can see, and then the emergency button. And so they're all recorded in video, and what does it look like on the screen, and what does it look like on an Apple, and what does it look like on a Google Chromebook, and these things are all answered for you. So we've got storytellers on our team. The chairman of our board is a very, very successful fintech executive who's come and helped guide us to these steps and to make sure we've hit these steps and pass these steps before we move on, so that we're sure. We're doing beta tests now, and we're in a place where we want to do multiple beta tests and then respond to how they use it, because the first couple we've learned how they set the system up is different. And we thought it was a very simple system, and so did they. But the simple difference of changing into one school is I'm going to this guidance counselor's office, as opposed to how we set it up. We thought they would be, I'm going to a location. Okay. And so how they set it up is very important. Another thing is the type of check-in or tip you're doing. We thought it would be all about school related things. Inside school, I'm bullied. Inside, schools have expanded to be community driven. What are the basic needs? Food, shelter, and clothing. If the kid doesn't have that, he's never going to learn. And so that is now what some of the schools are integrating that into their conversation, so that they're having the champions of the community help and mentor and do the things that the staff is directing. Because like Barb said, there's less than one guidance counselor per high school across America. It's terrible, but they're never going to change it until they have a baseline to make everybody be aware. Oh, you guys handled 300 plus incidents this semester. That's a lot. You need help.
Yeah.
Until you measure that and put it in front of somebody, you can just say, it's bad, it's bad, it's bad. But as soon as you put a number on it, everybody goes, oh, that's bad. And so that's the tool we've built. So.
Yeah, and building it with a cost-effective model for a solution, that's critically important too. I think a lot of us, I imagine it's a huge problem, but where does one begin to solve the crisis that is anxiety and depression and support systems and schools? So it's difficult.
And that's what again makes us different than all the other systems out there that do anonymous alerts only when there's a crisis at hand. And ours is every day, because the answer to your question, Eric, is over time. That's the only way to handle this problem, is over time. There is no band-aid, there's no quick fix, there's no pill. It's an interface, it's a comfort to the students to know that when they need help, there's somebody who's going to talk to them. They'll probably help themselves. They just need a little push.
Yeah.
So that's what we're here. Start that communication.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And some questions are coming in from the attendees, and I want to get to those. One of them is, why high school? Why targeting that age demographic? And I know part of it is the 22 million high school students and nearly 30,000 high schools, but I know there's a much more thought out reason for that. So I'm not sure if Barbara or David, if you want to address why.
We'll both answer that. First, the high school, because I had the experience in the high school. Now, granted, middle schoolers and all that, we don't want to just limit it to that, but as we're first rolling out, we think at the high school level, we can definitely set it up to go out to other members in the school community. However, there are certain regulations that you have to deal with younger students, so we have to be mindful of that as we go forward, and that's something we can work with in the school setting as they go forward. And David has done a lot of looking at that with different agencies that we've been in contact with to make sure that we are rolling it out in the proper fashion and everything.
Yeah, we have to be COPA compliant, which is privacy for children under 13. We have established plans that if it's a school plan presented to the parents, they can operate in those places. So we'll probably go from high schools to a bigger school responder moniker when we've established a good foothold in the high schools. And then those schools have been asking us constantly, can we do our middle schools and our elementary? And my answer is, anywhere there's a school issued piece of equipment is a good place to start. But to assume that the kids have the tools to communicate puts a little bit of a barrier to some of them.
Yeah.
And our gig and our goal is to take all the people all the time, regardless of anything, in the order that they need to be helped. Yeah. And so the hardware and the Wi-Fi are the only two things that are really limiting us.
Yeah. And a lot of schools now do have Chromebooks. So it is also set up on a web based for Chromebook as well. And that's for those students, that may be younger if we go forward, that a lot of them do have Chromebooks and not, a mobile phone that their parents want them to be on. And then that way they can go ahead and utilize it through the school that way.
Or a computer from home that, again, they can have a conversation that might be about the parents or the brother with a staff member or someone else, without anyone else who uses that computer having any tracks to follow. Yeah. So this is, again, very, very important to us, is that it's secured communications in the community. Mom can communicate to the teacher, the child can communicate to the teacher, the child can communicate with the parent. Those are all restricted conversations, all secured conversations. So that's very important to a lot of the school people who are worried about creepers or other people kind of getting in, or bullies from outside getting in and causing issues. They control this digital environment. Yeah. Schools control it all.
Yeah, that's really important. And I started to get into another question that came up, which was, some campuses do not allow cell phones. How do you effectively communicate under those circumstances? So it sounds like web-based applications, Chromebooks, other devices. I know you held up a kind of a geo tag that can be implemented throughout the campus as well.
These are dropped into different offices or different
hallways,
or a classroom, wherever the school wants it, in the lobby out front, in the principal's office. And then if someone calls from that location, we can pinpoint where they are so we know how to send help there. or ask them, you're right by the nurse's office, please step into the nurse's office. You know, it's a case by case basis where we deliver the information and they make the decision.
Absolutely, like a cost-effective the blue lights that they have on college campuses with the
Yes.
phones.
Mhm.
That's great.
It's a
That's great.
portable blue light. It's a portable blue light.
Yeah.
Perfect, perfect. And we're a little bit over the halfway mark, so I want to plug one reminder here. You can go, as always, to netcapital.com, search High School Responder, or go directly to netcapital.com/companies/High School Responder, where you can learn more. You can engage in the Q&A and in that fashion as well. And of course, you can push button invest and join the family and support this cause. You know, as we transition and continue the conversation here, I know you have other team members that we should definitely mention. And you mentioned Doug Brown a little bit, your CMO. And I know Ed is part of your team as well. Why don't you tell us a little bit about both of them and what they bring to the team?
Well, Doug and I first started working together before the turn of the century. And our first project together was for Tina Turner. When she played the Super Bowl, we put a digital music card, which was a CD the size of a business card, that was sponsored by E-Trade. And E-Trade paid for the production and distribution of those cards into the seat cushion for everybody that went to the Super Bowl. And Doug produced a beautiful video, and I did the back end stuff, which was I paid the royalties, I paid the publishing, I paid the artist. And all those things could happen from our music video card. And we did a couple of those music videos, and it became like a trading card. And here's the upside. For us, we got paid a bounty from E-Trade for every person that joined using the video card. We made significantly more money than anyone thought. And we were concerned about getting our money back for the production. When we made a deal with them, we got all that money back, but we made much more money on the success piece of that. So Doug and I are always, again, pushing the boundaries, using technologies that are available in a different way. And guess what? Getting somebody else to pay for it. All right. So the fans got a free piece of collectible merchandise. Of course, it had a gateway to E-Trade, but we got an unbelievable return on the number of people that made an E-Trade account from that disc. So Doug and I have done this kind of things multiple times. We've built ticketing systems over the years. He's very good at telling the stories. Okay, very good at it. And then Ed, as I had mentioned earlier, was in fintech, very successful in how they changed the marketplace as well for fintech for how their business worked. And that became an app-driven situation. The last member I'm going to share with you is our newest member, just joining our team from working on the sidelines very diligently. And now we have to have him participate more. He was an ex-high school principal. He's very well known nationally. He runs an organization, a charity organization that is all over the states with a large organization that helps provide community solutions back to schools for students. We're very proud to have him join the team as well. He's worked for the environmental FEMA in national disasters because of his experience. And so he's a crisis manager of the ultimate degree. And his reputation among other superintendents is stellar. Yeah. So he's opening doors for us on regional and statewide levels that will allow us to go in and make some deals with third parties, agencies, and or states to allow us to manage situations that are not during school time. So after school, weekends, summertime, holidays, his guys are on 24/7, 365. So again, it's going to be learning how to pass off those situations when they're not in school. That's going to really make this thing solve problems for kids, change their world.
And you mentioned one of the big differences between high school responder and other solutions in the market was this kind of longevity. The support is there, not just in times of kind of tantamount crisis, but even lesser mental health challenges or things like that. But what does the competitive landscape look like? Who else is out there, and how do you what are the big differentiators from high school responder, and why do you think that's a real competitive advantage?
The only person we've seen do anything similar to us with success has been the Veterans Administration for PTSD solutions. And they are single focused on one situation only, but they do a heck of a job at supporting the vets who are in that position. Unfortunately, they only support vets. So their learning and their technology is not being shared. And they do it over a course of time. We're the same way. We're over a course of time. We're localized to where the people are because they know how to deal with those people as well. And so we just felt that that was a better, help me out here.
We think it's a better solution because it's a matter of being right where it's needed. It's something that isn't just kind of dealing with that immediate situation. It's for the whole child to help them through that tough time. Kids go through tough times. I mean, you can see a student walk in one day, they're all happy and bright. The next thing you know, they're coming in, it's got their hoodie up, they're in a bad place. We don't know what happened in their home life. But it affects their education. And so we really, truly do need to take care of the whole student. And I think that's one thing that kind of sets us apart from others. Not that they don't care, they want to get there and help, but we are just trying to really solve, the situation in the school setting, not out there at a higher level with people they don't know. I've heard repeatedly about how they want people to come in and help them out at their school. And so that's what we want to do. And we want to make sure that that we're able to finally fill that need. I've seen, kids say that many times. And we actually had some students that we interviewed and spoke to, and they also care very much about their friends. And who else can tell us better than their friends, that they have need. Yeah. And if they don't want it out, then we can keep that, confidential as best we can, determining the situation, needless to say. But that's what it's all about. And I think that lends, the extra special something that we have.
And our competition are almost all responding to a weapon or a bomb or a knife in school with the police. And so it's great to have the police get a jump on it. But here in Pennsylvania, the system that they've put up, 23,500 phone calls came in. They had expected 500. 23,000 of those phone calls were about mental wellness conditions that should have been solved by the schools. Our Attorney General of the state of Pennsylvania wrote a piece of a letter grading themselves and said, we did a good job because we expected 500 and we issued 500, but what we didn't expect was 23,000 phone calls. And their centralized police response that now has to call each high school and notify them of a situation going on in their high school. That principal then calls a guidance counselor who that takes way too long to get the message out. So the other situation about the anonymous alerts is the kids are using it to bully and punk one another because they're calling up and saying, hey, that star football player's vaping in the bathroom. Mm-hmm. Well, the school has to investigate it. And so the kid's embarrassed because the school officials are checking on him, or we heard of one other situation where they said he's got something in his locker he shouldn't. Well, they punked the kid and they pulled him out of class, and the cops came, and they're getting over 10% of their phone calls are anonymous punks. And so they don't know how to solve that problem. And again, they're responding only to police-oriented things. So that call should have been handled at the school because the school does know how to handle that. So again, we're going back to the local school should make the rules.
And that report from Attorney General Shapiro, it was really enlightening. And I know there was some really good data in there. So I want to spend some time on that. I think it was the number one health and wellness issue on high school campuses was bullying. And I imagine that cyberbullying is a large contingent of that. I fear for my nieces and nephews as they're starting to grow up in this social media world. We talked about, so we saw bullying, we saw substance abuse, anxiety. What is the current framework without high school responder? What does that look like? And then with high school responder, how is that a much better solution?
It's a patchwork is really what it is. And that's the problem today, is there's no organized process. Tell us about it. It's all over the place.
It is. It's I'm a little older than the kids nowadays, obviously, but you know, when we had situations at school, we had to deal with the student one-on-one. It's really easy to say something nasty on the phone where they don't have to deal with that student, you know, looking at them and seeing, you know, the effects, and it morphs, it like mushrooms out there. And before you know it, you might have said something to, you know, your friend going, ha ha, you know, look at them. And then they spread it all over. And this poor kid, you know, there they are. And what's happening is people, you know, kids jump on board sometimes. They're kids. They you know, they do things and they don't realize the ramifications sometimes. And sadly, some kids have committed suicide. And the one thing that I truly saw when I first went in the school setting is I was amazed, and I come from a business background at that point, was how shocking it was to me to see the growth in 15 years of the incidents with students that needed to be helped, that needed to be there. I've had the kids curled up on my office chair in a ball, non-communicative, just totally, you know, and that was before the pandemic. And when you see that, you have got to realize that something is going on. And I do see, and I saw, you know, different information from the students saying, you know, we just, you know, sometimes they just need your ear for 5 minutes. Maybe if you can just talk to them and do that, and maybe, you know, that situation can dissolve. Maybe they won't get as in their face at you know, Bobby, who made them really mad because they said something. You know, and it is, we're teaching the whole student not only education, but we're teaching them how to deal, how to be grown-ups. This is what they do in the school setting. It is not just reading, writing, and arithmetic anymore. It can't be. It really can't be.
Communications is the first step to solutions. Without communicating to someone, it's very rare to have someone completely fix themselves. You kind of are always looking for a little feedback. You're going to do fine. Look at what you've already accomplished. Yeah. That little push is what changes their mind from this is not good to I can do this.
Yeah.
And as soon as we get them along to that point through communications, or start them, or say, I'm busy right this second, but I'm going to get to you at 3 o'clock this afternoon. Now they know de-escalation has started, and they see the downside of the roller coaster, not just the uphill.
And it's fulfilling as someone in education to see that student blossom. There is nothing better than seeing that kid, you know, knowing how they were maybe, you know, 2 months beforehand or a year or two ahead of time, and seeing what they've accomplished. And there is no greater goal at graduation than wishing them luck. And then when they come back and say, hey, you know, this is what I'm doing now. I mean, what more could you ask for? I mean, to me, that is just truly the best. And that's what I want to help solve as quickly as possible so we can get them to that better place. And this is, to me, the best situation because they can communicate. And that's what's really needed.
And as that's our mission. And as the accountant who's behind the scenes, there's profit to be made here. We can do this, become profitable, make a good return for our investors. But the biggest return here is going to be the heartstrings too. It not only fills your wallet, fills your heart.
Yeah, and Barbara, you mentioned the pandemic, and some of that data is just unimaginable. Pre-COVID-19, approximately 20% of students struggled with mental health and wellness issues, according to AAFS. And then just 1 year later, post-pandemic, number skyrocketed to over 50% of students experiencing those challenges. That is heartbreaking. I can imagine that now we're queuing up for another friction point in returning to schools.
Yes.
You know, what could not imagine a more important time for communication.
And Eric,
I
one of the
agree.
things we also found out was it's not just the students, the teachers need to reach out sometimes. They have anxiety.
Mhm.
They need help from one another. It's the village taking care of the villagers.
Yeah. And you're right. It's, I don't know, from my friends that are still in the educational setting, I heard a lot of stories. I get it. I worked until this last August. August was when I left the high school setting, to do more with this, because it was something I really wanted to push forward. And knowing what they're going to come back to, they're also, if they have the tools when they come back in the fall, at least we can help them manage what is going to be a huge situation. And plus, like we said, if we can get the data points as to how many incidents there are, I think the state, officials need to know what's going on. I think they want to know. I think they truly want to help. You look at, I'm going to say, Dr. Joe Biden. She's an educator. She gets it. I mean, she's going in the forefront to go ahead and see what she can do to help the students as well. And um, I think we can do it. I really do. I think we can, as David said, be profitable. I think we can help the kids, and I think there's no better thing to do than to be a good community to everyone.
What an incredibly powerful sentiment. Absolutely. Last couple moments here, and I'm gonna kind of like preface what's coming up later. We're going to allow for a very end, a little closing remarks, where you could talk about, what are one or two things that make now the perfect time to go to Net Capital and invest. I think some of the things we just covered right now, really kind of are some of the conversations. So I wanted to give you a little bit more time as we're preparing for that last closing remark. But before we do that, I'd love to go over two more things. All the traction that you've already accomplished over the last few short years, including building out the MVP, getting in the Apple and Google Play Store, working on the beta launch, and then where you plan to go for the future. And I know we talked about maybe other age groups, maybe other demographics nationally and internationally, but so let's do a little bit of what you've accomplished already in the traction, where you see the future is going, and then very lastly, why now is the perfect time to join. So Master, who wants to start us off with?
Do you want to head that up?
I'll
Go ahead.
start. The two big things for me as we move into the future are to make it multi-language so that there can be less and less barriers to everyone to reach out. We're doing some very extensive work with Google Translate. We've tried some private translation programs. It's just going to take us a little time to find the right answer for this. Mm-hmm. And when we finish that, my second big task in my mind is to create the notification system that works a little different. We would like to have, specialized notifications, much like the Weather Channel has its own sounds and its own notifications. We would like to operate that way, much like a bank. We want to send out a note that says there's a private message for you. And so that integration between the phone and the application so that we can notify people without giving away any information, just like a bank, or you went and had a test at the doctor the other day. They send you a note that says, hey, there's a private note for you, but you have to go into the app to get it. Because we're a fully secured app, that's the only way you can get it. And that's what the school really wants in terms of handling school and student information, is the control and the privacy factor, that it gets to the right people, but doesn't get anywhere else. Notifications are one of the ways that we make sure the right people get the message. Mm-hmm. So those are my two big things over the next year or so.
Yeah. And as I said, because I saw the need even before COVID, and everything, like everyone has been reading it. We've really got to get this into the schools now, as many as we can, and make sure that we can help these kids. Every time I see another news report, it's heartbreaking. These are children. These are children that don't realize that they can really get past this, that it's not as awful as it seems, but it is in their world because that's their world. And so if we can go ahead and get them through that and get them to go out to the other side and be, the great people that we know they can be, all the better reason to go forward in that respect.
It's give them a little push. And we're going to ask right now that everybody help us so that we can keep pushing.
Yeah.
Because the dollars that come to us turn around and go to a lot of kids.
Yeah.
So it's a smart financial investment. But as we've said, this is one that you can help locally. You can go to a school. If you can invest, help us open a door. There's associations, there's community groups, there's schools. Go to the school board, go to the superintendent, share with them that they need this tool. That's a help that everybody can pledge to.
That's perfect. And that was a great segue into why now is the perfect time. The fall is upcoming. Students are facing challenges that they never faced, really faced before in this new kind of technological and social media environment. And every dollar goes to support these kids and give them the support and help that they need to communicate effectively with their support systems. For everybody attending, thank you so much. I did add the links that David and Barbara mentioned at help.highschoolresponder.com, where you can check out those videos. The username is included in the chat, which is student, and the password I included as well, ABCD1234, perfectly appropriate for educators and technologists. So I love every bit of that. With all that being said, thank you so much for our participants who joined in. Thank you so much for our panelists, Barbara and David, for telling us about High School Responder and giving everybody an opportunity to learn more. And of course, as always, you can go to netcapital.com and invest. And I see, David, you want to see one last thing?
We really appreciate your help, Eric, and Net Capital all the way. The process you've put us through, very rigid, but very returning as well. So I'd have to say 2 thumbs up from the accountant.
Yeah, and thank you to everyone who came and listened to our story. Feel free to contact us. We're happy to speak to you individually as well.
Thank you so much for that. I really do appreciate it. And as I'm wrapping up, actually, what I'll go ahead and do is add a link to the YouTube channel in the chat. As always, this has been recorded and will be uploaded shortly. So if you've missed part of this, or if you know somebody who might be interested in learning more about High School Responder and potentially investing, please do go to our YouTube channel, share the video liberally. We want to get as much exposure to these great companies as we can. So thank you so much for the kind words, David and Barbara. Thanks for sharing about your story. I know I have a personal soft spot as my wife is an educator. I mentioned that before.
Yeah.
So I just love the good work that you're doing, and please continue to keep up the good work.
Thanks you so
Eric.
much.
Thanks, everyone. Bye now.
Bye-bye.